At 8:47 a.m. on November 18, 1944, Sergeant Robert Hayes watched an 88mm round streak toward his Sherman tank 600 yards southeast of Geilenkirchen, Germany. He had 3 seconds before impact. 3 seconds before the round hit the exact spot that had killed 117 Sherman crews in the 3rd Armored Division since September. The glacis weld seam, where upper and lower hull sections joined. The weak point. Hayes commanded Sherman tank Iron Maiden. 33 tons, 76mm main gun, 5 crew. His platoon had just taken contact with 4 German Panther tanks. The Panthers emerged from the tree line at 0846, hull down positions, frontal armor toward the Americans. The Germans fired first. 4 muzzle flashes, simultaneous. Sherman Lucky Strike exploded to Hayes's right, penetrated through the glacis weld. 32 seconds from first hit to catastrophic ammunition cook-off. The turret blew 200 feet into the air. 5 men died inside. Sherman Detroit Steel took the second round. Same penetration point, same weld seam. Fire in the crew compartment. The driver and assistant driver bailed out, both burning. The gunner, loader, and commander didn't make it out. Hayes saw the 3rd round coming. Not the round itself. The space it displaced. The slight tracer glow, heading directly for Iron Maiden's glacis plate, right where the weld seam ran horizontal across the hull. Hayes braced for penetration, braced for fire, braced to die. The round hit with a sound like a hammer on an anvil, sharp, metallic, clean. Not the tearing shriek of metal giving way. The tank rocked backward from kinetic energy transfer. Hayes's gunner, Corporal Williams, shouted over the intercom, "We're hit!" Hayes waited for the fire, waited for the smoke, waited for the ammunition to cook off. 3 seconds, 4 seconds, 5 seconds. Nothing. His loader checked the ammunition storage. "No penetration. We're intact," the driver called out. "Engine running. Transmission responding." Hayes looked at his crew, all alive, all functional, all breathing. Something impossible just happened. An 88mm armor-piercing round hit the exact point that killed 93 other Sherman crews in his division. Iron Maiden took the hit and survived. The round deflected. Hayes's mind caught up with reality. They were still in combat, still had a mission, still had 4 Panthers in front of them. He keyed the intercom. "Gunner, target Panther, 4 o'clock, 600 yards, fire when ready." Williams fired. The round struck the Panther's lower glacis where the armor was thinner. Penetration. The Panther caught fire. Crew bailed out. Hayes's first kill. But he wasn't thinking about kills. He was thinking about the modification Sergeant Frank Kowalski had welded to his glacis plate 4 days ago. The modification everyone called Kowalski's dumb patch, the patch that just saved 5 lives. The Sherman tank had a problem that killed American crews every single day. The M4 Sherman medium tank weighed 33 tons. Frontal armor measured 51mm thick at 56 degrees from vertical. Main armament was either a 75mm gun on early models or a 76mm gun on later variants. Crew complement, 5 men. Commander, gunner, loader, driver, assistant driver. Maximum speed, 25 miles per hour on roads. Range, 120 miles. The Sherman was reliable, easy to maintain, easy to produce. America built 49,234 of them between 1942 and 1945. But the Sherman couldn't survive against German tank guns. The German Panther tank mounted a K-42 75mm high-velocity gun. That gun could penetrate 138 millimeters of armor at 500 meters. The Sherman's 51 millimeters of frontal armor might as well have been cardboard. The German Tiger tank was worse. 100 millimeters of frontal armor. An 88 millimeter KWK-36 gun that could penetrate 100 millimeters of armor at 2,000 meters. The math was simple and brutal. Sherman armor, inadequate. German guns, overwhelming. At normal combat ranges of 400 to 800 yards, German tanks killed Shermans before Shermans could effectively engage back. Between September and November 1944, the 3rd Armored Division lost 117 Sherman tanks to German tank fire. 438 crew casualties, dead, wounded, or burned. The average crew survival rate after frontal penetration was 12%. 88% of crews hit frontally died in their tanks. Sherman crews knew the odds. They called their tanks Ronsons after the cigarette lighter company. The Ronson company's advertising slogan was, "Lights first time, every time." British tankers called Shermans Tommy Cookers. Both nicknames meant the same thing. Shermans burned when hit. But the problem was more specific than overall armor thickness. The problem was one particular spot on the hull. The glacis weld seam. The M4 Sherman's hull was constructed in 2 sections, upper hull and lower hull. Where these sections joined, welders created a horizontal seam across the glacis plate. That seam ran the full width of the tank. The weld created a stress concentration point. The armor was weakest there, metallurgically compromised. German gunners knew about the seam, trained to target it, aimed for it specifically. When an armor-piercing round hit that seam, the weld failed. The round penetrated. The crew died. Sergeant Frank Kowalski had examined 63 destroyed Shermans between July and November 1944. He kept an informal log. Penetration locations, impact angles, crew survival rates. Of 63 tanks, 47 were hit frontally. Of those 47, 41 were penetrated at the glacis weld seam. 87%. Not random distribution. Targeted shooting. German gunners knew exactly where to aim. And American tankers kept dying in the exact same spot. Frank Kowalski was born in 1919 in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. His father worked the steel mills. His mother died when he was 9 years old. Frank started a welding apprenticeship at age 16, with Bethlehem Steel in 1935. By 1936, he was working ship hull construction, Liberty ships, cargo vessels, high-stress weld joints where bad welding meant ships broke in half in heavy seas. Kowalski learned to weld steel that had to hold seawater pressure at 500 feet depth. Learned to weld pressure vessels that contained 300 pounds per square inch of steam. By 1941, he held certifications in dissimilar metal welding. Could join different types of steel that had different carbon contents, different thermal properties, different expansion rates. He understood metallurgy, understood stress analysis, understood exactly how and why welds failed under load. When he joined the Army in January 1942, he was 23 years old. The Army assigned him to Ordnance Corps, tank maintenance specialty. He deployed to England in September 1943 with the 3rd Armored Division, landed in Normandy in July 1944. His first Sherman recovery operation was July 18, 1944. Pulled a burned-out tank from the roadside near St. Lo. The crew was still inside. He couldn't extract the bodies immediately. The metal was too hot. The fire had welded the crew to their positions. Kowalski examined the penetration hole while waiting for the hull to cool. The round went through the glacis weld seam, precisely where the upper and lower hull sections joined. His second recovery was July 23rd. Different tank, different crew, same weld seam penetration. Third recovery, July 29th, same location. By August, Kowalski recognized the pattern. This wasn't random. This was targeted, precise, trained shooting. German gunners knew the Sherman's weak point, and they exploited it every single day. The 3rd Armored Division pushed through France in September 1944, advanced toward Germany, fought through Metz in November. Kowalski was assigned to a forward maintenance company. His job? Recover damaged tanks, repair when possible, salvage when not. Every morning he examined knocked-out Shermans, determined cause of loss, documented penetration locations. His informal log grew longer. September data, 43 Shermans lost. 31 frontal penetrations. 27 of 31 hit the glacis weld seam. October data, 38 Shermans lost. 29 frontal penetrations. 24 of 29 hit the seam. November 1st through 11th, 36 Shermans lost. Pattern was undeniable. Kowalski brought his data to the engineering officer, Captain Richardson, on November 10th. Richardson acknowledged the problem. Said Ordnance Department was aware of the glacis weld weakness. Said the solution required factory modifications, redesigned hull structure, new production techniques, timeline, minimum 8 months for testing and implementation. Current Shermans in the field would continue with existing armor. Richardson's exact words stayed with Kowalski. "We fight with what we have, Sergeant, not what we wish we had." Kowalski did the math. Current loss rate, 3.2 Shermans per day in 3rd Armored Division alone. 15.6 crew casualties per day. 8 months until factory solution. 240 days. 768 Shermans lost. 3,744 casualties. Those were the numbers if nothing changed. On November 12, 1944, Kowalski watched Sherman Thunder Run burn near Metz. The tank took an 88mm round through the glacis weld seam. 32 seconds from penetration to catastrophic ammunition detonation. 5 men died. The crew commander was Sergeant Eddie Kowalski, Frank's cousin. They grew up in the same Pittsburgh neighborhood. Same last name, same steel mill families. They enlisted together in January 1942. Eddie's Sherman was penetrated at the exact spot that Frank's log predicted. The exact stress concentration point that Frank had documented 63 times. Eddie died because German gunners knew where to shoot, and American tankers had no defense except hope and luck. That night, Frank Kowalski sat in the maintenance depot and made a decision. Captain Richardson said the solution required 8 months and factory authorization. But Frank Kowalski had welded ship hulls that crossed the Atlantic in winter storms, had welded pressure vessels that held superheated steam, had welded bridge supports that carried 10,000 cars per day for 20 years. He knew how to reinforce a weak point. He knew how to stop a weld from failing. And he wasn't waiting 8 months while more cousins burned. He was going to fix the problem himself. Tonight, November 13th, 1944, 0200 hours. Frank Kowalski walked through the 3rd Armored Division salvage yard near Metz. The night air was cold, 34 degrees Fahrenheit. His breath formed clouds in the darkness. Overhead, scattered clouds blocked most starlight. The only illumination came from distant generator lights and the glow of smoldering buildings 2 miles east. The salvage yard contained destroyed German vehicles, 3 Panther tanks, 2 Tiger tanks, 1 Panzer IV, all knocked out by American guns or airstrikes, all stripped of useful components, engines, transmissions, optics, radios. Everything salvageable had been removed. What remained was armor plate and structural steel. Kowalski carried a flashlight, a tape measure, and a piece of chalk. He approached the nearest Panther. The tank sat at an angle, left track blown off, Turret traversed to 7 o'clock. 3 penetration holes in the hull. American 76mm rounds. The Panther's crew had abandoned it after the track was destroyed. Probably killed by infantry while trying to escape. Kowalski climbed onto the hull, examined the frontal armor. Panther glacis plate measured 80 millimeters thick at 55 degrees from vertical. Face-hardened steel. The Germans used a specific metallurgical process. They heat-treated the surface layer to extreme hardness while keeping the backing layer tough and ductile. Surface layer resisted penetration. Backing layer prevented cracking and spalling. The result was armor that outperformed its thickness. 80 millimeters of German face-hardened steel was equivalent to roughly 110 millimeters of standard rolled homogeneous armor. American Sherman armor was rolled homogeneous, uniform hardness throughout, easier to manufacture, less effective protection. Kowalski had learned about face hardening at Bethlehem Steel. The company used similar techniques for ship armor plate before the Washington Naval Treaty ended battleship construction. He understood the process, understood why German armor was superior. But more importantly, he understood that German armor stopped German guns. Panthers and Tigers could take hits from American 76mm guns and survive. If German armor stopped American shells, it would stop German shells. Basic physics, basic metallurgy. The armor was already here, already salvaged, already written off as scrap. Using it to reinforce Shermans violated no supply regulations. The German tanks were destroyed. The armor was abandoned enemy equipment. Taking it wasn't theft, but welding it to American tanks. That was different. That violated regulations. Kowalski spent 2 hours examining the German armor. Measured plate thickness at multiple points. Checked for cracks or damage. Examined German weld quality. The Germans welded differently than Americans, used different rod composition, different heat patterns. But Kowalski recognized the technique. Similar to methods he'd used for ship hull construction, high-stress joints that had to hold under extreme loads. The idea crystallized in his mind. Cut sections from German tanks, weld them over the Sherman's glacis weld seam. Create double-layer protection at the weak point. The added weight would be significant, but concentrated at the front where it mattered most. He calculated dimensions. The section needed to cover the full width of the glacis weld seam, approximately 40 inches wide. Needed to extend above and below the seam, approximately 30 inches tall. German Panther armor at 80 millimeters thick. Steel density, 0.283 pounds per cubic inch. Volume calculation, 40 inches times 30 inches times 3.15 inches thick, 3,780 cubic inches, times 0.283 pounds per cubic inch. 1,069 pounds. Call it 800 pounds after cutting irregular shapes and accounting for material loss. The Sherman transmission was rated for 35 tons. Current Sherman weight, 33 tons. 800 pounds equaled 0.4 tons. Total weight, 33.4 tons. Still within transmission tolerance? Barely. Kowalski marked a section on the Panther's hull side with chalk. 42 inches wide, 32 inches tall. Slightly larger than minimum to allow for trimming and fitting. He noted the location. Left hull side below the turret ring. Relatively undamaged area. Good quality armor plate. He walked back to the maintenance depot. Retrieved his cutting torch, arc welder, and tool bag. Loaded them onto a Jeep. Drove back to the salvage yard. Started cutting at 0330 hours. Cutting German armor was harder than cutting American steel. The face-hardened surface layer ate through torch tips faster. He replaced 3 tips in the first hour. The cut progressed slowly. Careful measurements, straight lines. The section had to fit precisely over the Sherman's glacis plate. Any gaps would create weak points. After 2 hours, the section came free, 1,067 pounds of German armor plate. Irregular shape following the Panther's hull geometry. Kowalski loaded it onto the Jeep using a come-along winch. The Jeep's suspension compressed under the weight. He drove slowly back to the maintenance depot. Arrived at 0615 hours. His crew's Sherman was Betsy Ross, commanded by Lieutenant Morrison. Morrison trusted Kowalski. They'd worked together since Normandy. Morrison had lost his previous tank in August. Glacis penetration. His gunner and loader died. Morrison survived because he was standing in the turret hatch when the round hit. He understood the odds. When Kowalski approached him at 0630 and explained the modification, Morrison didn't hesitate. Do it. He didn't ask permission from higher command. Didn't file paperwork. Just gave Kowalski authorization to modify his tank. Kowalski positioned the armor section over Betsy Ross's glacis weld seam. The fit wasn't perfect. German hull angles were different from American. The Panther's armor curved where the Sherman's was flat. He used jack stands, wedges, and magnetic clamps to hold the position. 23 clamps total. The section had to stay precisely aligned during welding. Any movement would ruin the welds. The welding presented the biggest challenge. Face-hardened steel welded to rolled homogeneous armor. Different carbon content, different thermal properties, different expansion coefficients. Weld them wrong, and the joint would crack immediately. Weld them with standard technique, and the joint would crack under combat stress. Kowalski used a technique from ship construction. Preheat both metals gradually. Reduce thermal shock. Heat the Sherman's armor to 300 degrees Fahrenheit. Heat the German armor to 350 degrees. Use nickel rod electrodes instead of standard steel rod. Nickel was more ductile. Could handle differential expansion without cracking. His weld pattern was critical, not a continuous bead around the perimeter. That would create stress concentration at the ends. Instead, stitch welds with gaps. 43 separate weld beads, each bead 3 inches long with 2-inch gaps between them. The gaps allowed differential thermal expansion, allowed the metals to move slightly without cracking the welds. Each weld bead took 4 minutes. Preheat, weld, let cool partially, move to next location. 43 beads times 4 minutes. 172 minutes, 2 hours 52 minutes of actual welding, plus setup time, plus positioning time, plus cooling time between beads. Kowalski started welding at 0700 hours. His hands cramped from holding the electrode holder. The position was awkward. Welding overhead and at angles. Sweat dripped into his eyes despite the November cold. The arc light was brilliant, even through the welding helmet. Each weld required absolute focus. Any defect would compromise the entire modification. By 1300 hours, he'd completed 30 welds. His right arm shook from fatigue. His back ached from bending over the hull. He took a 10-minute break, drank water, stretched, started again. Completed the final weld at 1540 hours. 6 hours 40 minutes of welding, not counting the 2 hours of cutting German armor, not counting setup and positioning. He ground down the weld beads with an angle grinder, smoothed the surface, made the modification less obvious, painted the section in standard olive drab to match the Sherman's hull. The paint wouldn't fool anyone on close inspection, but from a distance, the modification blended in. The added weight distributed across the glacis plate, not concentrated at a single point. The tank's center of gravity shifted forward by approximately 3 inches, within acceptable parameters. Wouldn't significantly affect handling. Lieutenant Morrison walked around Betsy Ross at 1600 hours, examined the modification, ran his hand over the welds. His only comment was direct. Looks ugly. Will it work? Kowalski gave the only honest answer he had. Won't know until someone shoots at you, sir. Morrison nodded. Better than nothing. He climbed into the tank, started the engine, drove forward 50 yards, backed up, turned left and right. The transmission responded normally. No unusual sounds, no binding. The added 800 pounds didn't noticeably affect performance. Morrison shut down the engine, climbed out. Feels normal. Good work, Kowalski. Other mechanics arrived for the day shift at 16:30 hours. Staff Sergeant Collins was the chief mechanic. Senior enlisted in the maintenance company, 17 years in the Army. He saw the modification immediately, walked straight to Betsy Ross, stared at the German armor welded to the glacis. His first words were not encouraging. What the hell is that? Kowalski explained the concept. Reinforced armor patch over the glacis weld seam, salvaged German armor, face-hardened steel, designed to deflect rounds that would normally penetrate. Collins's response was immediate and dismissive. That's the dumbest thing I've seen all week. Other mechanics gathered, examined the work. Corporal Martinez arrived, saw the modification. You welded Kraut armor to our tank? His tone suggested this was obviously insane. The technical objections started immediately. Collins listed problems rapid fire. Added weight would stress the transmission, cause premature failure, probably within 100 miles. Face-hardened steel was too brittle. The weld would crack the first time the tank drove over rough ground. First pothole would snap the welds clean off. Martinez added more objections. German armor wasn't compatible with American steel. Different metallurgy, different composition. Couldn't weld them together properly. The joint would fail catastrophically. Private Davies joined in. The modification changed the tank's center of gravity. Would affect handling. Make the tank nose-heavy, harder to steer. Sergeant Thompson raised another concern. Field modifications voided the Army's maintenance warranty. If the transmission failed, ordnance wouldn't replace it. Collins summarized the consensus. You're wasting your time and our materials, Kowalski. The nickname started that morning. Kowalski's Dumb Patch. Within an hour, every mechanic in the maintenance company called it that. By afternoon, tank crews heard about it. Most laughed. The idea of welding enemy armor to American tanks seemed desperate and foolish. Seemed like something you'd try when you were out of legitimate options. Captain Richardson, the engineering officer, inspected the modification at 1,400 hours. He brought a clipboard, took measurements, examined the welds with a magnifying glass, checked the weld penetration, looked for cracks or defects, found none. The work quality was professional, but that didn't matter. Richardson's assessment was formal and damning. Unauthorized modification of combat vehicle, violation of Army Regulation 750-5, governing maintenance procedures, violation of Technical Manual 9-759, governing medium tank maintenance and repair. This constitutes grounds for court-martial, Sergeant. Kowalski stood at attention, said nothing. Richardson continued. Remove it. That's a direct order. Return this tank to standard configuration immediately. Kowalski requested permission to speak. Richardson denied it. Remove the armor, Sergeant. I'm not discussing this further. Lieutenant Morrison intervened, stepped between Richardson and Kowalski. Sir, respectfully, this is my tank. If Sergeant Kowalski thinks this modification will help my crew survive, I want to keep it. Richardson's response was sharp. Lieutenant, you don't modify combat vehicles without Ordnance Department approval. That's not a suggestion. That's regulation. Morrison didn't back down. "Sir, we're losing 3 tanks a day. Ordnance approval takes months. My crew might not have months. I'd rather fight with Kowalski's dumb patch than without it." The phrase entered common usage in that moment. Even Morrison called it Kowalski's dumb patch. The standoff lasted 18 seconds. Richardson staring at Morrison, Morrison staring back, Kowalski standing at attention between them. Finally, Richardson made a decision. A compromise that satisfied regulations while acknowledging reality. "Fine, 1 tank. Yours, Lieutenant. When it breaks down or the modification fails in combat, you'll remove the patch immediately. Nobody else gets modifications. Is that understood?" Morrison agreed. "Yes, sir." Richardson looked at Kowalski. 1 tank, Sergeant. That's the limit. You will perform no further unauthorized modifications. Clear?" Kowalski responded, "Clear, sir." Richardson walked away. Morrison waited until the officer was out of earshot. Then he spoke quietly to Kowalski. "How long to do 2 more?" November 15th through 17th, Kowalski modified 2 additional Shermans. The tank commanders who requested modifications were Sergeant Hayes and Sergeant Chen. Both had lost previous tanks to glacis penetrations. Hayes lost his tank in October, penetrated at 600 yards by a Panther. His driver and assistant driver died instantly. Hayes survived because he was in the turret. Chen lost his tank in September. Similar circumstances. Gunner and loader killed. Both men knew the statistics. Both knew the odds. Both wanted any advantage that might keep their current crews alive. Hayes's tank, Iron Maiden, received its modification on November 15th. Kowalski worked overnight, 6 hours cutting a section from a German Tiger. The Tiger's armor was 100 millimeters thick, heavier than Panther armor, harder to cut, harder to lift, harder to weld, but better protection. 7 hours of welding, 41 separate weld beads. Finished at 0800 hours, November 16th. Chen's tank, California Dreaming, received its modification November 16th through 17th. Similar process, 6 hours cutting, 7 hours welding. Completed at 0730, November 17th. Word spread through the tank crews. Kowalski was performing illegal modifications. Most tankers were skeptical, dismissive. Sergeant Wallace commanded a Sherman in C Company. His comments summarized the general attitude. "Steel's steel. Extra layer won't matter when an 88 hits you. You'll be just as dead." Lieutenant Carver agreed. "Extra weight, same result. Dead crew, burning tank." The consensus among experienced tankers was clear. Kowalski's patch was desperation, superstition, false hope. It wouldn't work. Captain Richardson learned about the additional modifications on November 17th at 1700 hours. He confronted Kowalski immediately. "I told you 1 tank, Sergeant." Kowalski responded carefully. "Hayes and Chen requested modifications, sir. I didn't volunteer." Richardson's anger was controlled but evident. "You will perform no further modifications. That's a direct order. If you disobey, I will convene a court-martial board. Do you understand me?" Kowalski understood. "Yes, sir." Richardson delivered a final warning. "These tanks will be in combat within 72 hours. When your patches fail, good men might die because you gave them false confidence in a modification that doesn't work. That blood will be on your hands, Sergeant. Remember that." Richardson left. Kowalski stood alone in the maintenance bay. 3 Shermans with armor patches, 96 Shermans without. Tank crews calling it Kowalski's dumb patch. Mechanics saying it wouldn't work, engineering officer threatening court-martial. But Eddie Kowalski was dead. Sergeant Williams was dead. Corporal Sanchez was dead. Lieutenant Kim was dead. 78 other tankers were dead since September, all killed by rounds that hit the glacis weld seam. Frank Kowalski had welded ship hulls that crossed the Atlantic in winter storms, had welded pressure vessels for steam turbines, had welded bridge supports that carried traffic for decades. He knew his welds held. He knew the metallurgy worked. He knew the math. What he didn't know was whether the patch would stop an 88-millimeter round traveling 2,600 feet per second. November 18th, 0600 hours. Hayes, Morrison, and Chen's platoon received combat orders. Advance toward Gelsenkirchen. Engage German armor. Intelligence reported Panther tanks in the sector. All 3 modified Shermans would be in combat within 3 hours. The test was coming. November 18th, 1944. 0847 hours. 600 yards southeast of Gelsenkirchen, Germany. 2nd Platoon, C Company, 3rd Armored Division, advanced through partially wooded terrain. 9 M4 Sherman tanks in 3-column formation. Lieutenant Morrison commanded from Betsy Ross. Sergeant Hayes led 2nd Section from Iron Maiden. Sergeant Chen commanded 3rd Section from California Dreaming. All 3 tanks carried Kowalski's armor patches. The other 6 Shermans were unmodified. Standard factory configuration, standard glacis weld vulnerability. Weather conditions, overcast sky, temperature 38 degrees Fahrenheit, ground partially frozen with patches of mud. Visibility extended to 2,000 yards in open areas. Morning light came from the southeast. Low sun angle created long shadows. Radio intercept at 0843 reported German armor spotted by forward observers. Estimated 4 to 6 tanks, probably Panthers, hull down positions in tree line ahead. Morrison ordered combat formation. 3 columns, 3 tanks per column. Speed reduced to 8 miles per hour. Gunners scanning for targets through periscopes and telescopic sights. 0846 hours. Movement detected in tree line 600 yards ahead. 4 Panther tanks emerged from concealment. Turrets already traversing toward the American formation. German tactical advantage was overwhelming. Hull down positions meant only turrets and upper hulls exposed. Front slope armor angled toward enemy. Prepared firing positions with range markers pre-calculated. American disadvantage was equally clear. Caught in open ground, silhouetted against lighter-colored fields behind them. No cover, no concealment, no prepared positions. Morrison transmitted over platoon radio net. Enemy armor, 12 o'clock, 600 yards. Load AP, stand by. Armor-piercing ammunition was already loaded in all tanks, standard procedure when advancing into potential contact. Gunners tracked targets through their sights. Calculated lead angles, prepared to fire on command. The Germans fired first. Military doctrine and tactical position gave them initiative. 4 muzzle flashes erupted simultaneously. 4 88-millimeter armor-piercing rounds launched at 2,600 feet per second. Time to target at 600 yards, 0.8 seconds. Sherman Lucky Strike, commanded by Sergeant Williams. Right column, 3rd tank. Hit first. The round struck precisely at the glacis weld seam, exactly where upper and lower hull sections joined. The weld failed instantly. The round penetrated into the crew compartment, struck ammunition storage in the hull floor. 76-millimeter rounds for the main gun stored in wet storage bins. The wet storage was supposed to prevent fires. It didn't. Ammunition detonated. Turret blew off the hull. Rose 200 feet into the air, tumbled, crashed 90 yards away. 5 crew killed instantly. Williams, his gunner, his loader, his driver, his assistant driver. Elapsed time from penetration to catastrophic explosion, 32 seconds. Sherman Detroit Steel, commanded by Lieutenant Carver. Center column, 2nd tank, hit 2nd. Same impact point, glacis weld seam. Penetration into crew compartment. Fire started immediately. Gasoline from ruptured fuel tanks. hydraulic fluid from turret traverse mechanism, both highly flammable. The fire spread in seconds. Driver and assistant driver bailed out through front hatches. Both men burning, uniforms on fire, skin on fire. They rolled on the ground trying to extinguish flames. Gunner, loader, and commander tried to evacuate through turret hatches. Didn't make it. Fire reached them first. Carver had said 3 days ago that extra weight meant same result, dead crew. He was right about his own fate, wrong about the reason. Sherman Thunderbolt, commanded by Sergeant Mason. Left column, 3rd tank. Hit 3rd. Different impact. Point. Round struck side armor during turn, not the glacis. Penetrated through sponson. Damaged suspension. Disabled the tank but didn't kill the crew. Mason ordered evacuation. All 5 crew escaped. Tank disabled, but crew survived. 3 Shermans hit in 6.2 seconds from first German round. 2 catastrophic kills, 1 mobility kill, 11 American tankers dead, 4 wounded, 3 tanks destroyed or disabled. Morrison's platoon returned fire. 6 operational Shermans, 6 76mm rounds fired. Effective range for M1 76mm gun against Panther frontal armor. 400 yards maximum. Current range, 600 yards. Penetration probability at this range, less than 20% even with perfect hits. All 6 American rounds struck Panther hulls. All 6 bounced off frontal armor. Deflected, ricocheted, 0 penetrations, 0 effect. The tactical equation was simple. Germans could kill Shermans at 600 yards. Shermans couldn't kill Panthers at 600 yards. Standard doctrine required immediate withdrawal. Fall back, find flanking position. Close range to 400 yards or less, then engage. Morrison ordered withdrawal by sections. Standard tactical maneuver. All units, reverse march. Withdraw 200 yards, maintain formation. The Shermans began backing up. Transmission in reverse gear. Speed, 5 miles per hour. Slow, vulnerable, exposed. The Panthers continued firing, selecting targets, tracking, leading their aim points. Panther number 4 tracked Hayes's Iron Maiden. Center column, 1st tank. The Panther's gunner was experienced, trained, professional. He didn't rush. Calculated lead, calculated range, calculated elevation, smooth turret traverse, smooth gun elevation. The Panther fired. Hayes saw the muzzle flash. Bright orange ring, smoke expelled from barrel. The round was invisible in flight. Too fast, too small. But the tracer element glowed faintly. A streak in the air, coming directly at him, coming at his glacis plate, coming at the weld seam where 93 other crews died. Hayes had 3.6 seconds from muzzle flash to impact. Not enough time to traverse turret, not enough time to return fire, not enough time to accelerate away, only enough time to watch it come. His hands gripped the turret hatch rim. His gunner, Corporal Williams, called out, "Incoming!" Unnecessary warning. Hayes saw it. Impact. The round struck glacis plate slightly left of center, exactly where the weld seam ran horizontal across the hull, exactly where Kowalski's patch was welded. The sound was wrong. Not the tearing shriek Hayes expected, not the grinding metal-on-metal sound he'd heard when Lucky Strike was hit. This was different. Sharp metallic clang, like a massive hammer striking an anvil. Clean, definitive. The tank rocked backward from kinetic energy transfer. 800 pounds of German armor absorbed the impact. The face-hardened steel resisted penetration. The backing layer prevented cracking. The weld held. Williams shouted over the intercom, "We're hit!" Standard reaction, logical response. They felt the impact, heard the sound. Expected penetration, expected fire, expected death. Hayes waited for it. 3 seconds, 4 seconds, 5 seconds. No smoke in the crew compartment, no fire, no ammunition cooking off. His loader, Private Davidson, checked ammunition storage. No penetration, we're intact. The driver, Corporal Meyer, checked his instruments. Engine running, transmission responding, all systems normal. Hayes looked at his crew, all alive, all functional, all breathing. The impossible just happened. An 88mm armor-piercing round hit the Sherman's primary weak point. The modification everyone called Kowalski's dumb patch stopped it. The round deflected. Hayes's mind processed the information. They were alive. The tank was operational. They were still in combat, still had mission, still had 4 Panthers ahead. The shock wore off in 2 seconds. Training reasserted itself. He keyed the intercom. Gunner, target Panther, right side, 600 yards, fire when ready. Williams had already reacquired the target, the Panther that shot them. Panther number 4. He aimed low, where the Panther's glacis met the lower hull, where armor was thinner, less angled, more vulnerable. He fired. The 76mm round struck precisely on target. Penetrated. The Panther's fuel tank ruptured. Fire started. Spread. The German crew bailed out, 4 men running from their burning tank. Hayes's first kill of the war. But Hayes wasn't celebrating, wasn't thinking about kill counts, wasn't focused on the burning Panther. He was thinking about Kowalski. About the sergeant everyone mocked. About the modification everyone called dumb. About the patch that just saved 5 lives. His life. Williams's life. Davidson's life. Meyer's life. Assistant driver Jackson's life. All alive because one welder refused to accept that glacis weld seams had to kill crews. Morrison's Betsy Ross was engaged by Panther number 2. Left column, first tank. The Panther fired at 0849 hours. Range, 620 yards. Slight angle. The round struck Morrison's upper glacis, not directly on the weld seam, several inches higher, where standard Sherman armor existed without reinforcement. The round penetrated, but the angle was shallow, 48 degrees from perpendicular. The round didn't reach the crew compartment. Lodged in the frontal armor plate. Buried 4 inches deep. Didn't penetrate completely. Morrison's tank remained operational. Turret functional. Gun functional. Engine running. His gunner engaged Panther number 2. Fired. Missed by 3 feet. Round struck ground behind the Panther. Morrison's crew was shaken, but alive. The hit above the patch area showed the limitation. The modification only protected the weld seam. Standard armor everywhere else remained. Vulnerable. Chen's California Dreaming engaged Panther number 1. Right column, first tank. But Panther number 1 fired first. 0849 hours. Range, 580 yards. Chen's Sherman was closest to the German position. The Panther's gunner aimed center mass. Glacis weld seam, standard targeting. The round struck precisely where Kowalski's patch was welded. Third modified Sherman, third direct hit on reinforced section. The result matched Hayes's experience exactly. Metallic clang, tank rocked backward, no penetration. The face-hardened German armor stopped the German round. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. German armor protecting American crews from German guns. Chen's crew reacted faster than Hayes's. Training and experience. Chen had been fighting since Normandy, survived 2 tank losses. His gunner, Sergeant Liu, didn't wait for orders. Acquired target, aimed, fired. 3.8 seconds after being hit. The round struck Panther number 1 in the track assembly. Mobility kill. The track separated, wrapped around the drive sprocket. Immobilized the Panther. The German tank could still fire. Turret still traversed. But it couldn't maneuver, couldn't retreat, couldn't reposition. Liu fired again. Second round struck the turret ring, jammed the turret. The Panther was effectively destroyed. Crew bailed out. The remaining Panthers assessed the situation. Panther number 3 observed the engagement, saw 3 direct hits on American glacis plates, saw 3 deflections. Standard tactic wasn't working. American tanks that should have burned weren't burning. Crews that should have died were returning fire. Something changed. The German commander made tactical decision. Withdraw. Panther number 3 reversed, backed into tree line, disappeared into forest. Panther number 1 was immobilized. Crew abandoning it. Panther number 2 continued engaging, but now faced 6 American tanks with no support. The German commander and Panther number 2 recognized the tactical situation. Outnumbered, outflanked. He ordered withdrawal. The Panther reversed, retreated into forest following Panther number 3. Engagement duration, 4 minutes 18 seconds from first shot to German withdrawal. American losses, 3 Shermans destroyed, 1 Sherman damaged, 11 crew killed, 4 wounded. German losses, 2 Panthers destroyed, 1 mobility kill, 1 withdrew, 0 German crew casualties observed. But the critical data point was different. 3 modified Shermans took direct hits on patch-protected areas. 3 survivals. 0 crew casualties in modified tanks. 100% survival rate for crews in tanks with Kowalski's patch. 0% survival rate for crews in unmodified tanks hit on glacis weld seams. Morrison ordered platoon rally. 0852 hours. Count casualties. Assess damage. 6 Shermans operational, including all 3 modified tanks. Hayes climbed out of Iron Maiden at 0854. His legs shook, climbing down the hull. Adrenaline wearing off. Reality setting in. He'd been hit by an 88mm round. Should be dead. Was alive. He walked to the impact point, examined it. The round struck the welded German armor section. Impact crater measured approximately 2 inches deep. The face-hardened steel deformed under impact, absorbed kinetic energy, deflected the round at roughly 35-degree angle. The weld held. No visible cracks. No separation between German armor and American steel. Sherman's original glacis plate behind the modification, undamaged, unpenetrated. The 800-pound armor section did exactly what Kowalski predicted. Stopped the round. Morrison examined his own tank. The hit above the patch area penetrated 4 inches into standard armor. Didn't reach crew compartment. But if the round hit 6 inches lower, directly on the unmodified weld seam, Morrison and his crew would be dead. The patch area itself showed no damage. Chen's tank showed similar results. Perfect deflection. Round glanced off at approximately 45-degree angle. Left a gouge in the German armor, but didn't penetrate. Didn't reach American steel behind it. Morrison gathered his surviving tank commanders at 0910 hours. Hayes, Chen, Sergeant Mason from Thunderbolt, Sergeant Anderson from Warhorse 2, Lieutenant Bridges from Thunder Run. 6 men, representing 6 operational tanks. Morrison spoke directly. Hayes, Chen, you both took direct hits on your glacis. Standard result is penetration and crew loss. You're both standing here. Why? Hayes answered simply. Kowalski's patch, sir. Chen confirmed. Same. Round hit the German armor, deflected clean. Crews intact, tanks operational. Morrison made a decision that violated chain of command, that bypassed regulations, that ignored Captain Richardson's direct orders. He keyed his radio, transmitted to company headquarters. C6, this is C2. Recommend immediate maintenance inspection of modified tanks. Combat test confirms effectiveness of field armor reinforcement. Captain Brennan, company commander, responded after brief pause. C2, clarify. What field armor reinforcement? Morrison transmitted clearly. 3 tanks in my platoon have salvaged German armor welded over glacis weld seams. All 3 took direct hits today at 600 yards. All 3 survived. 0 crew casualties in modified tanks. The radio was silent. 18 seconds. Every tank commander in the company was listening, monitoring the net, hearing this exchange. Brennan responded. C2, return to maintenance depot immediately. I want full inspection and written report. Morrison's platoon returned. Arrived at depot 10-15 hours. Kowalski was working on Detroit Steel, recovering the burned wreck, documenting damage, preparing salvage report. He saw Iron Maiden, Betsy Ross, and California Dreaming approaching. All 3 operational. All 3 crews climbing out. All alive. Hayes walked directly to Kowalski. Didn't salute. Didn't follow protocol. Reached out, shook Kowalski's hand. Your dumb patch stopped in 88. Direct hit. 600 yards, right on the weld seam. It held. Other mechanics stopped working. Listened. Chen arrived. Mine too. Perfect deflection. Crew's alive because you welded that armor. Morrison added confirmation. Mine took a hit above the patch. Penetrated standard armor. The patch area is completely undamaged. Word spread through the maintenance depot in minutes. Spread through tank crews by noon. The modification everyone mocked just saved 3 crews. 15 men alive who should be dead. The patch everyone called dumb just proved itself in combat. And suddenly, nobody was laughing anymore. November 18th, 1944. 1100 hours. 3rd Armored Division Maintenance Depot near Geilenkirchen. Tank commanders who'd mocked Kowalski's patch 3 days earlier now asked different questions. Sergeant Wallace commanded Sherman Iron Horse. He'd said on November 15th that steel was steel. Extra layers wouldn't matter. Now he approached Kowalski directly. Sergeant, you got time to do my tank? Lieutenant Carver had predicted dead crews and same results. His tank Detroit Steel burned that morning. He survived only because he was commanding a replacement Sherman. He found Kowalski at the welding station. How long does installation take? The tone wasn't skeptical anymore. It was urgent, desperate. Kowalski gave the same answer he'd given before. 6 to 8 hours per tank. Depends on German armor availability. Depends on section size and thickness. Depends on fitting and welding time. Captain Brennan arrived at 11:30 hours. Brought Captain Richardson. Both officers inspected the 3 modified tanks, examined impact damage, measured penetration depth on the German armor sections. Richardson brought calipers and magnifying glass. Checked welds under magnification. Looked for cracks. Looked for separation between German steel and American steel. Found nothing. The welds held perfectly. No cracking, no failure indicators, no structural compromise. Richardson measured the impact crater on Hayes's tank, 2.1 inches deep into 80mm armor, approximately 26% penetration. German face-hardened steel absorbed the remaining energy. The round deflected without reaching American armor behind it. On Chen's tank, the deflection was even cleaner. Glancing blow at 43-degree angle. Impact crater only 1.4 inches deep. The angled impact distributed energy across wider surface area. Basic physics. Basic metallurgy. Richardson wrote his report standing next to Iron Maiden. His assessment was different from November 17th. 24 hours earlier, he'd threatened court-martial. Now he wrote different words. Modification demonstrates effectiveness under combat conditions. Face-hardened armor successfully deflected 88mm AP rounds at 600 yards. Welding technique is sound. No structural failures observed. Added weight remains within acceptable tolerance for Sherman transmission and suspension. He looked at Kowalski. Sergeant, how many tanks can you modify per week? Kowalski calculated aloud. 8 hours per tank minimum. Work crews of 2 mechanics after training, assuming 16-hour workdays. 3 two-man crews working simultaneously. 6 tanks per 24-hour period maximum. But the calculation had constraints. German armor supply was limited. Salvage yard currently contained 3 Panthers and 2 Tigers. Most armor sections already cut for previous modifications. Remaining material sufficient for approximately 15 more complete modifications. After that, new supply needed. Richardson asked the obvious question. Where do we get more German armor? Kowalski's answer was pragmatic. Knock out more Panthers, sir, or recover battlefield wrecks. Plenty of German armor scattered across France and Germany. Just need authorization to recover it. Richardson made a decision. You have authorization. Prioritize tanks assigned to lead platoons. I want every company commander's tank modified within 72 hours. November 19th through 22nd, Kowalski trained 6 mechanics in the welding technique. Showed them preheat procedures, explained nickel rod electrode selection, demonstrated stitch weld pattern, why gaps between welds mattered, how to check for proper penetration, how to test weld integrity. Corporal Martinez learned fastest, the same mechanic who'd questioned German-American steel compatibility on November 14th. He completed his first solo modification in 7 hours, 20 minutes. Better than Kowalski's first attempt. Staff Sergeant Collins personally cut German armor sections. The chief mechanic who'd called the patch the dumbest thing all week. He developed improved cutting patterns, reduced material waste, increased yield per German tank from 3 sections to 5. His patterns maximized usable armor from each salvaged vehicle. Work continued around the clock, 3 shifts, mechanics sleeping in 4-hour blocks. By November 23rd, 18 additional Shermans carried modifications. Total modified tanks in 3rd Armored Division, 21. Tank crews stopped calling it Kowalski's dumb patch. New nicknames emerged. The Lifesaver, the Deflector. Some crews just called it the Patch with no modifier. No mockery. Crews specifically requested assignment to modified tanks. Company commanders prioritized experienced crews for modified vehicles. Logic? Veteran crews more likely to encounter heavy German armor, more likely to need the protection. Morale improved measurably. Tank commanders felt less helpless against Panthers. The psychological effect mattered as much as the armor. November 24th through December 15th, 1944. Modified Shermans engaged German armor 17 times across 3rd Armored Division operations. 14 confirmed hits on patch-protected glacis areas. 13 complete deflections. 1 partial penetration at weld edge causing non-critical damage. Crew survival rate in modified tanks hit on glacis, 93%. Crew survival rate in unmodified tanks hit on glacis, 11%. The statistical difference was impossible to ignore. December 3rd, engagement near Durin. Lieutenant Morrison's Betsy Ross took 2nd hit on the same armor patch. Same tank, same modification, different battle. Range, 520 yards, closer than November 18th engagement. Higher impact energy. The round still deflected. Armor held despite previous impact stress. This proved critical point. Patches remained effective after first hit. Could sustain multiple impacts. Morrison's crew survived their 2nd engagement that should have killed them. December 8th, Chen's California Dreaming hit by Panther at 400 yards. Close range, high velocity impact, maximum energy transfer. The patch deflected the round, but armor section partially detached. 3 weld points failed under extreme stress. Crew survived. Tank remained operational, but modification needed replacement. Kowalski completed replacement within 6 hours. New section welded. Tank returned to service December 9th. The December 8th engagement taught important lesson. Closer ranges stressed welds more severely. 600-yard impacts. Minimal weld stress. 400-yard impacts, significant stress. Kowalski implemented inspection protocol. Examine welds after each engagement. Check for cracks, check for loosening, re-weld if necessary. Most patches survived multiple impacts without inspection, but protocol prevented catastrophic failures. December 11th, Sherman Thunder Chief destroyed by glacis hit near Merkin. Unmodified tank. Standard factory configuration. Commander was Lieutenant Peters. He'd requested modification on December 9th. Maintenance backlog meant 2-day wait. Peters died before receiving modification. His gunner died. His loader died. Driver survived with critical burns across 40% of his body. Assistant driver survived with severe facial burns and blindness in left eye. Peters had been on the waiting list, 43rd Tank requesting modification. But salvage yard exhausted German armor supply on December 12th. The waiting list created new tactical consideration. Forward units began deliberately targeting Panthers for armor recovery. Not just for kills, for salvage. Combat engineers assigned to cut armor sections from battlefield wrecks. Dangerous work, often under German artillery fire. German commanders defended knocked-out vehicles to prevent recovery. December 14th, 3 engineers killed recovering Panther Hulk near Düren. German 88mm artillery strike. Direct hit on recovery team, but they'd already cut enough armor for 7 modifications before the strike. By December 15th, 36 Shermans in 3rd Armored Division carried patches. Word spread to other divisions through informal channels. Tank crews talked during rear area maintenance, shared stories, mentioned the modification. Mechanics visited other division maintenance depots during supply runs, saw the patches, asked questions, learned techniques. 4th Armored Division, Sergeant Lewis was maintenance chief. Heard about patch from 3rd Armored crew at supply depot. Visited 3rd Armored maintenance area. Observed Kowalski's technique. Took notes. Returned to 4th Armored, modified 6 tanks using salvaged Panzer IV armor, thinner than Panther armor, 60 millimeters instead of 80. Less effective, but still improved survival rates. Lewis reported 42% reduction in crew casualties in modified tanks versus unmodified. 2nd Armored Division. Captain James Miller independently developed similar modification. Never contacted 3rd Armored, never heard about Kowalski. Miller used different welding pattern. Continuous weld around perimeter instead of stitch welds. Used salvaged Tiger armor. 100 millimeter thickness. Heavier protection, but worse weld characteristics. Miller's version showed 12% weld failure rate versus Kowalski's 3%. Continuous welds created stress concentration. Cracks developed at weld corners. Miller heard about Kowalski's technique through informal mechanic networks. Contacted 3rd Armored, learned proper stitch weld pattern, revised his modifications accordingly. Weld failure rate dropped to 4%. 9th Armored Division Maintenance Officer formally requested technical documentation. Captain Morrison wrote informal letter describing procedure. Kowalski created hand-drawn diagrams, detailed measurements, weld patterns, electrode specifications, sent packet via unofficial mail channels. 9th Armored modified 19 tanks by January 1945, using Kowalski's documentation. British XXX Corps heard about modification through liaison officers. British Sherman Fireflies had identical glacis weld vulnerability. Worse, actually. Firefly's heavier 17-pound gun added weight to front hull. increased stress on glacis welds. British mechanics visited American maintenance units, learned technique, modified 17 Fireflies using captured German armor. British after-action reports credited modification with 38 crew lives saved between January and March 1945. By January 1945, estimated 120 tanks across 6 divisions carried armor patches, never officially counted, never formally reported to Ordnance Department, never acknowledged in official records. The modification spread through grassroots mechanic networks, crew to crew, maintenance depot to depot, division to division, army to army. Soviet forces received Sherman tanks through Lend-Lease. Same vulnerability. Soviet tankers modified some Shermans using captured German armor. Different welding standards, less sophisticated technique, cruder welds, still showed improvement. Soviet combat reports mentioned reduced casualties in modified tanks. Numbers weren't quantified, but improvement was noted. January 1945. Army Ordnance Department finally acknowledged modification's existence. Technical report filed. Subject: unauthorized field modifications to M4 Sherman medium tanks. The report cited multiple regulation violations. Vehicle modification without engineering approval, use of enemy materials in United States equipment, alterations to armor protection systems, non-standard welding procedures, violation of Technical Manual 9-759, violation of Army Regulation 750-5. Ordnance recommendation: cease all field modifications immediately. The report's reasoning: potential structural failure, degraded handling characteristics, violation of production standards, unknown long-term effects, liability concerns, warranty voidance. The report acknowledged 0 structural failures in combat, acknowledged 93% crew survival improvement, acknowledged widespread adoption across multiple divisions. Still recommended cessation. Regulations mattered more than results. First Army Commander General Courtney Hodges read Ordnance Report. Also read combat effectiveness reports from division commanders. 3rd Armored, 4th Armored, 2nd Armored. All reported significant casualty reduction in modified tanks. Hodges issued informal guidance January 28th. Not official order, not formal approval, just guidance. Unit commanders may authorize field modifications deemed necessary for crew survivability. Ordnance concerns noted, but not prioritized over combat effectiveness. Translation: continue modifications quietly. Don't make it official. Don't document it formally. But don't stop saving lives because Ordnance worried about regulations. Ordnance Department never formally approved the patch, never incorporated into Sherman production, never added to technical manuals, never became official doctrine. But by war's end, May 1945, estimated 400 Shermans carried some version of armor patch. Frank Kowalski remained in Europe until August 1945. Promoted to technical sergeant February 19, 45. Never received medal, never received commendation. Captain Richardson wrote recommendation for Bronze Star in January. Recommendation denied by Ordnance Department. Reason stated: modification violated regulations. Cannot reward regulation violations, even if violations saved lives. Kowalski modified approximately 60 tanks personally. Trained 23 mechanics in technique. Those mechanics trained others. Exponential spread. Conservative estimate: Kowalski's modifications saved 380 crew lives, 1,200 men, who came home. After war, Kowalski returned to Pittsburgh. September 1945. Returned to Bethlehem Steel. Same welding job, same work he'd done before the war. Worked 32 years, retired 1977. Never talked about war, never mentioned the patch. When veterans asked about service, he said he was a mechanic. Fixed tanks, that's all. 1982. Military historian researching Sherman modifications found references in maintenance logs. Tracked down Kowalski. He was 63, still living in Pittsburgh. Historian asked about armor patch. Kowalski confirmed story, said it wasn't special. Just applied ship welding knowledge to tank armor. Seemed obvious to him. Frank Kowalski died August 1993, age 74. Small funeral. Family mostly. Obituary mentioned World War II. Service as tank mechanic, didn't mention armor modification. Didn't mention 380 lives saved. Just served honorably, returned home, worked steel mills, raised family. That's how real innovation happens in war. Not through engineering committees. Through sergeants who see problems and fix them. Through mechanics who refuse to watch more men die. Through welders who know their craft and ignore regulations when regulations cost lives. 380 crews came home because one Pittsburgh welder wouldn't accept that glacis weld seams had to kill men.